Folks, welcome to the next Chalk Talk with the Coach. This is the next evolution series of interviews I do with coaches and professionals in the field or around the field, just to get their perspective on their field and how they help and what's going on. So today I got with us Osteopath Jason Paes. So Jason, my man, tell us a bit about yourself.
So I've been a personal trainer for about 10 years, and I'm also an osteopathic manual therapist. And so what an osteopath is, basically it's kind of similar to other realms that you're more familiar with, like chiropractic and athletic therapy, where it's addressing the body alignment and tissues by doing bone manipulation and also tissue realignment. And this is pretty much throughout the whole body. So it's not just the more traditional stuff like shoulders, hips, and everything, but we also look at feet, head, soft tissue in the organs to be able to help free everything up from that standpoint, which may be causing some bigger systemic problems in the body. We look at it not so much just where you're sore or where you might be having symptoms going on, but we're looking at it from a more holistic pattern in terms of the problems that you might be having in your feet or in your head or something like that. It may be caused by something else, like because of these different connections that we have in the body. So we try to look at it from more of a systemic part of it as well. And I also have a bit of a background in lifting and powerlifting, so I'm a little bit at least understanding more from like a wear and tear, beat yourself up kind of approach to the body.
Athletic performance perspective versus just the layman as well.
Exactly.
Jason's been taking care of me for several years now, and probably one of the reasons I'm still functioning as a human being.
Trying.
I will say, the first time you adjusted my organs, it was definitely a different day.
Yeah, for anybody not used to that, it's definitely a bit of an unusual thing that goes on. But what it is that we're just trying to. Your body can build up tension anywhere, really. So you might be accumulating some tension in the system, like in your liver, your diaphragm, your digestive system, which may be causing like some constipations, some issues that are just kind of ongoing, and that can really have some big interconnections with the rest of the body. There's some linkages to how well your spine moves and how well your shoulders move from more of the digestive tract, and the liver and the diaphragm. So it's the body's pretty connected. So it's not always just the simplest answer of just my shoulder stopped working because I beat it up. It might be something else going on too.
Yeah. What usually causes the tensions in, like, say, the organs, for example?
So I think one of the big things that people are getting more and more aware of is that I mean, it makes sense, right? Like what you eat affects you, right? So I think we're getting more and more as more research on the gut and everything's starting to come into play. We're starting to understand more of the relationship between bacteria, gut flora, everything along those lines, and its influence on the system in general, right? So you can actually have, there's a lot of research in terms of your digestive system and its accumulation of tension and how that can be not only affecting your brain, which will have effect on your neurological system, which can be influencing some motor pattern functions. It can be causing some tension in the membranes of your body because your intestines are basically just a big membranous tissue, and it can have effects on the rest of your membranes in the body. So that's where you start getting into these foods that may be causing a bit of intolerance. Maybe you just got sick and you had a big constipation period, something along those lines, and it's causing these global tension from this inflammatory process going on in the body, and then that's having a causation effect on the rest of your system.
Yeah, the domino effect in full force.
Exactly, you got it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've been studying I've been doing a lot of research on the gut for years now, and it's one of those really fascinating things that you don't really think about it until you start to get really deep into it and start putting all the pieces together. And then when you realize like that the brain, the spinal cord, and the gut are all at birth like 1, 2, and 3 before anything else is done. Like even your heart, it's brain, spinal cord, gut, and that all is kind of linked together. When you realize that the gut and the spinal cord and the brain are all linked, it really makes a whole lot more sense in how the body actually functions.
Oh, 100%, right? And it's a complex balance between everything. It's how well your neurotransmitters are working, how well your gut bacteria is going, how well your hormones are going, and it's trying to look at how well everything is integrated together, because once one thing starts to stack, then it can cause changes down the pathway, right? One of the things I've been diving into a bit is functional neurology, and it's one of the articles that was really interesting from what they submitted in terms of the research of gut and brain relationship was there was the bacterium from your gut was going up the vagus nerve, which was having an effect on the base of the cranium, their cerebellum, and that was starting to change motor patterning from issues that way. So it starts to look at not just the, sure, if we're going and beating ourselves up in a gym, or if we're doing office work and we're sitting in these positions for a long period of time, that will have its effect on the body, but it also might be a little bit more global and bigger issues in terms of things that are habitual in diet and stuff like that. So it's really a huge picture, and just trying to understand the person is the biggest thing, because we all got things that we habits and tendencies that we'd like to do. So if we can understand what might be helpful and what might be harmful, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, the inside out approach and how to kind of individually work with an individual as opposed to the blanket kind of systems.
Exactly, right? So
and that's what I tell people when I do nutrition with them and training with them for that matter. Like what we're doing, the principles that we follow are all guidelines. And then each person has their own, I guess you could say, sensitivity to the guidelines and how well they flex to them. So you're always going to have outliers, and we kind of build everything to the bell curve, and then we kind of adjust according to the individual.
100%, right? Because everybody's got their framework of, you got neck pain, right? Well, what could be causing the neck pain, right? Everybody's different. So if we tell everybody to do a specific stretch or mobility for that, it might work for population A, but not population B or C, right? Because everything's different. So it's about that inside out approach and trying to just better understand what is causing and going to help you.
Yeah, and that's why, like, when I run with like athletes, like I hear all the time, like, oh, my shoulder's sore, my knee is sore, my hip is sore, and it could be something as simple like, oh, I worked really hard last Monday benching, or I got tackled and I got jammed up. But it could be something like, I haven't done anything in weeks and my shoulder's killing me. Like, okay, now it's probably a different answer. It's probably not like working out or training or your sport. It could be something like, what are you eating? Why is there shoulder? Maybe you've got too much, maybe your movement patterns are too weak or something like that. Like there could be so many different answers, and you have to take that, eliminate the common factors, and then start to get into the nitty gritty stuff. Like let's okay, did you get hit? No. Did you train too hard? No. Did you do this? No. Did you do this? No. Okay, so now we gotta start looking at other stuff. And that's where most people stop. Like, well, I don't understand why it's not this or this. Well, it could be your gut. You're eating a food issue. You could have a food sensitivity to like dairy, and you have dairy like 5 times a day, and it could show up in your shoulders. Stuff like that.
Exactly, right? And there was one thing from my program that was told to me, I think it was in second, third year, and it was as I was starting to get introduced into the concept of not everything musculoskeletal is musculoskeletal. And it's that they were saying that because osteo is quite an old profession, it started off in 1890s, and so it's a very big progressions, big changes in physiology with people and everything. And they were saying that the population started to change more, so that less of what's causing you pain is to do with something that directly happened to you. It's starting to come more from your viscera, your organs, your cranium, your those kind of neurotransmitters, the gut flora that's starting to affect us, those things are starting to create systemic changes in us, and that's what's leading to more and more of our issues.
That's crazy when you think about that, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's literally how much sleep we have, what we eat, what we do, like how much we stimulate the brain. Like so many of those things are so much bigger than just what you necessarily are doing day in and day out that might be causing it.
Yeah, it's the overall like issues that you don't
Exactly
notice. And that's pretty amazing when you think about it. Like, say an athlete, for example, and athletes are always interesting to work with because they think they got to train. Well, usually if you want more, sometimes you have to do less. So usually what I tell athletes, there's 4 pillars you have to learn to excel at if you want to be a long-term complete athlete. Because if you flex too far into one, I find you'll break them down pretty quick. So I usually say that you have to do training, you have to do nutrition, you have to learn how to recover, and you have to have the mindset for it. And if I've got an athlete that just trains, and I can get them to train like 12 hours a day, 16 hours a day, not a problem, but they don't pay attention to nutrition, they don't know how to recover, and their headspace is all over the place, I'm only looking at 25% at best of that athlete and their success. So I've got to work on the other 75%.
exactly right.
And it's such a big factor that it's not necessarily just train. It's training, nutrition, learning to recover, getting your headspace right. And a lot of times with like athletes that want to go, they usually, to do better, they have to do way less training and way more of the other stuff.
Oh, totally, right? Because how many people do you see who can just like bust in the gym doing everything all the time, but they don't get necessarily where they want to be, right? Like weight loss, right? I've been going and working out hard and busting my butt and doing all that stuff constantly, but I can't lose a pound, or I'm not necessarily getting that way. And like, well, did you look at diet? Did you look at sleep? Did you look at whatever, right? So all those things are so important.
I was dealing with an individual here a few months ago, and wants to run, ultra marathon, high intense conditioning, can't lose a pound to save her life. She's probably eating 1,200 calories a day. It should be falling off her. But I looked at her and I said, when's the last time you missed a training session? She goes, I've missed a training session in 10 years. I was like, cool. When's the last time you missed a meal? I didn't have breakfast or lunch today. I'm like, okay. How's your sleep? She goes, well, I wake up all the time. I'm like, yeah. I said, the reason why you're not losing weight, don't get me wrong, is probably because you have a lot of hidden calories somewhere. So there's probably a lot of like water weight from the sheer cortisol you have running through your body constantly all the time.
And that's one of those sneaky ones that are massive, right? Cortisol, because that can just affects your kidneys, affects your digestion again. It messes up with the gut permeability again, and then that starts to make up your thyroid and et cetera, right? So there's that story again, right?
Exactly. It's that chronic release of cortisol that just won't let go. And it's not going to let go until you slow down and chill out and get more of a, I don't want to say balance, because no athlete's ever going to have balance, but more of a balanced lifestyle compared to what you currently have.
Oh, exactly, right? Yeah. And obviously people who are athletes or people who have that tendency to want to work hard, that's the thing that you don't necessarily want to discourage, but you also want to teach times to, like, heck, I've been the one who's had a tendency in my younger days to just overkill it, and just, if I do more, you're going to get better, right? And then it's like, well, why is my lifts going down? Why are this going down? It's just because your system's like, you know what, just calm down, right? And give yourself a chance to recover.
So long.
What's that?
You can only run on an overdrive so long.
Exactly, right? So you just got to learn to sleep and rest and all that good stuff too.
Yeah. Matt, when I went to work with Matt Wenning, he said something really, really profound. He said, the minute a 20-year-old learns to work out like a 40-year-old, that's when I'm going to have a super strong 20-year-old. And I was like,
True. Yeah.
The problem with that is no one knows how to train until they're 40 or 50 years old.
How many times have I said, I wish I knew this when I was 20?
Dude, we've all said it. Like, how many times, like I was looking at the workouts I did when I was 20 years old. Immortal. You could have hit me with a sledgehammer and I'd have been fine. I remember like benching or doing something, and I remember like partially tearing my rotator cuff on like, I think it was a Friday. Monday, International Bench Day. Me and the boys go max effort benching like on Monday. And I'm like, guys, I couldn't even get my arm up to here. And the guy's like, you got a bench. I'm like, well, I guess I got a bench. And I remember like,
go up here, I can just press there. You're good.
Yeah. And I remember like 315 or something. And that's probably why my shoulders are absolutely mangled now for stupid shit like that. But common sense would say, I just ripped the hell out of this. I should probably not do this.
Maybe just calm it down a little bit.
Yeah, no, max bench, boom, hit it. Like, stupid, because you got to bench 2 to 3 times a week when you're 20.
It went up, and so you got to do it. Every day's bench day.
And the other days are curls. I mean, God. So yeah, like it's so funny. Like the minute you realize how you have to train for longevity, and when I started making my mindset to like I want to do a meet when I'm 80, that changed my whole headspace on training for meets because I've got a business I'm running, I've got a kid I'm trying to raise, we got family, like it's all kinds of stuff. I gave up my big numbers when I became a coach and had a family and all that stuff. But now if my goal is to like lift when I'm 80, I first have to live to be 80 to lift. So
start there.
I gotta make it to 80. Okay, that's 40 years from now. What's going to get me alive in 40 years? So, and that's what people don't realize. Like, the more you try and rush that number and chase that number, the more I realized I busted stuff up.
Exactly, right.
Stop chasing it. Everything got easier. But it also comes with the amount of stress and volume of workload I have in my regular day. Like, I know, like, when this happened, immediately, like, everyone's like, oh, you're not working anymore. My stress level went through the roof because we got bills to pay. I knew I wasn't hitting big numbers.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Like, I've got to, there's no way I'm going to touch a number for a year.
And that's the biggest thing that people don't necessarily always correlate with stress, right? Is that you have your stress that, like running to get to something, and that's an obvious stress that you're able to perceive, right? But you have your emotional, you have your nutritional, you have your like so many different things are those stressors that we are unaware, like necessarily perceiving or aware of, and that can be just toxic.
Oh yeah, especially over a prolonged period of time because your body doesn't know the difference between meeting a deadline and being chased by a lion. It just perceives stress.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you just can't run a marathon from a lion, it'll eventually catch you. So the stress just stops. But if you constantly have a deadline, you've got to do this, you got to do that, you never actually recover. You're always burning the candle at both ends.
No, totally.
What would you got any ways to kind of like help mitigate that with people? What would you recommend?
I think everybody's got their different ways of dealing with stress and having ways, because you can just, the blanket ones that a lot of people talk about is having time for yourself, being time to meditation, or time to be able to allow yourself to become in the moment and to clear your mind, clear your stress and all that stuff, which is great, but it's sometimes hard for people to do. Right now is a great opportunity because we got nothing else to do, so we might as well work on ourselves. But I think that trying to remove the amount of cascading different aspects to it is the biggest piece. So if you are running around stressed all the time, eating fast food, bringing in toxins, having just chronically setting yourself up in a situation in which all of this toxin stuff is coming into play, it's not necessarily that being stressed is a horrible thing, or that eating fast food is a horrible thing. But when you have all of them, that's when it really becomes damaging. So if you can try and improve it by, let's say I'm doing all this time, like 7 days a week, no nonstop, just eating processed food, eating all those kinds of things, doing everything and working hard, no recovery, lack of sleep, all those factors is what starts to destroy us. And so if we can take more time for ourselves, if we can make sure that we're eating more meals than not, that is actually, not from a box, where we're cooking, where we're doing things properly, right? Those things are the biggest pieces that will help with just keeping adrenals down, cortisol down, toxins out, and that's when your body has a chance to actually recover. When you're bombarding it all the time, that's when you get the big problems. So
Constantly
it's
trying to bucket that's already full.
exactly right. It's just that glass overfilling with everything, right? And then you're just a wreck and running around, and you're wondering why your workouts are going good, because your body has no more to give, and so, or it can't take anymore, and your lifts are going down because you're pushing yourself in the gym, you're pushing yourself here, you're not feeling yourself properly. And I think those things are the really big pieces to this whole story. And I think the toxins are the biggest thing in our body, in our lives, that are going to decrease performance, decrease longevity, all those kinds of things. So trying to bring in good, healthy antioxidants, B vitamins to help the brain, to give yourself time to actually chillax and just like enjoy life. It's going to help with all those pieces, right? Because you usually don't see people who are running around stress cases living long lives.
No, generally not. It's and it's always interesting because the more I study, the more I read, the more I research, the more you realize you don't know anything, which is really fun. Like when you think about it, it's really, really funny. But you come across resounding themes from different books or different people you follow, and like, say I'm reading someone like Robert Sapolsky, like the guy that understands probably cortisol and stress more than anyone else on the planet, or one of the, like, he said all this stuff for years. And I read another book by like Dr. Tara Swart, who's like a neurologist, and she says the same things. And all these guys start to say the same things. Maybe he's saying it a different way, and it's like, wow, everyone's saying the same thing that thinks on a higher level than I. Maybe I should start paying attention to it.
Yeah, 100%.
Try and get a 20-year-old listening and tell you not to squat max effort 3 days a week.
And that's the thing, whenever you look into this stuff, is that people keep saying it sounds like the simple basic stuff because it's kind of repeated a lot. But if you sleep, if you eat vegetables and green stuff and all those, like drink lots of water to be able to flush toxins in your body, make sure you're going to the bathroom regularly, like all those like simple things that sometimes get pushed aside as like, oh yeah, that's the normal stuff. But like, what's the secret thing? Like, what's the pill I take that gives me all the lifts and all the gains? And it's there's no pill. It's just the everything step by step, right? Exactly, right? I mean, testosterone and steroids are great, but that's got to be a problem too. So there's no winning.
Yeah, and that's what's so funny, because like when I was coaching a lot, like just a lot more gen pop than I was now, living nightmare client were two types of people. One, the marathoner.
Yep.
Two, the bride that showed up 4 to 6 weeks before her wedding that wanted to lose 20 damn pounds.
Yep.
Two absolute worst clients in the world. Tell a marathoner that they can't run, that their ankle, knee, low back, and shoulder pain is generally because they've run so much for so long that we have to stop, reset, recover, and build up all the weak areas. Or tell a bride that running and doing a marathon a day and she's already stressed the nines and starving herself is probably not the best way to lose weight too.
And what you bring up there just kind of makes me think about another point, is that diversity is huge. Is that the person who's running the marathon, running every single day, well, they're doing the same movement every single day and just beating feet, knees, hips, all that kind of stuff. You're not creating any diversity or flexibility. You're just pounding the pavement, right? And then when you have somebody who hasn't necessarily built up some of those foundational stuff, you're just like, okay, I'm 20 pounds overweight, I'm just going to run every day or just do everything in dramatic fashion. Well, that's extremes in any sense is never good. And it's about the path, right? You got to keep everything moving well, doing normal habits, learning when to take a break and when not to take a break, and just having that nice bit of peace that way, rather than you're not going to healthily, you're not going to lose like 50 pounds in 2 months. You're not, and you just got to, you're not going to do anything in a very meaningful fashion in a very short period of time, because otherwise you're doing these extremes to be able to get there, or you're doing these like cheating, and that always tends to either revert majorly the other way or not teaching you how to do a long term.
Yeah, I always talk to new powerlifters and we start working, and they're like, I want to break a national record in 2 years. And it's like, okay, the national record in your weight category is like a 650-pound squat. You squat 225 pounds. The potential for you to do it is there, but your frame and your training age and your experience under the bar tells me it's not likely. We might get you to like, say, 450, 500, maybe 550, but 650 will be a stretch. And like, well, I got to do it in 2 years. And it's like, the faster you get there, the faster you're done in the sport.
Yeah.
And that's what I learned in powerlifting. I don't know how many meets I've gone to where there's been someone that crushes these numbers, and you see them crush it for about a year. They do 3, 4, 5, 6 meets a year. Then you get to like the 18-month to 24-month mark, and they're like, oh, I'm not going to do this meet. My knee's kind of sore. And then, I'm not doing this meet because my shoulder's kind of banged up. And then after like 2.5 years, you never see them.
Yeah.
You know, they've got a training age of 2 years, and they think, I'm going to do the small off squat program to get a huge squat. It's like, you realize the small off squat program was designed for Russian Olympic lifters that were literally only doing Olympic lifting and not working full time and doing this and had a family. They literally got paid to lift, and then they got enough drugs to make them literally bulls. Women too. Like, jumping into a super advanced squat program, probably not the best way to go, especially for a pro, if you're not a pro athlete with nothing but recovery on your book.
No, exactly, right. And people got to take in those factors, right? I remember going in through school and just being like stressed in nines, and my classes were about 10 hours a day, and I would go and do my lifts afterwards, and I had, delusions of being able to lift the exact same that I could in a 10-hour day of intense brain fried schooling, versus just a normal everyday kind of routine. And sure enough, when I went to go try to pick up the normal weight I would be doing, I'd maybe be hitting about 60 to 70%.
And like 110.
Exactly, right? So it's all those factors are just huge. And so, yeah, longevity, take your time. Those are the biggest pieces of mind that ever,
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because I tell lifters, like, you understand that in order for you to lift much larger numbers, 2-3 times what you currently lift, it takes time for your tissues to adapt to that stimulus over time. Like, it takes a long time for tendon strength to get strong enough to handle that load. It takes a long time for your musculature and your bone structure to handle that load. And that's why when you see guys like do a bunch of steroids, they'll like lift these great big numbers, and all of a sudden they blow like their quad tendon.
Exactly, right? Like how many tendons
yeah. It's just too much of a force for that tendon over time. Or vice versa, when they do a bunch of growth hormone and they start tearing muscle bellies because they just haven't had a chance to build up that tissue.
The foundation's not there.
Yeah, it takes a long time. And when I realized, like, man, my days of really lifting big numbers, they're done because I've got too much on my plate. I only get to sleep 7 hours a night if I'm doing really good, and it's broken sleep because right now we've got a 4-month-old. So there's so many factors I have to take into consideration, and I just flat out said, lift when I'm 80. Good choice. Stay healthy till 80. I'm still lifting.
Exactly, right?
I'll set a world record. Why? I'm the only one in my category.
Nailed it.
Yeah. But yeah, like, people don't realize that when you have so much stimulus, there needs to be a period to recover from the stimulus. And that stimulus can be anything from, stress to food sensitivities and issues to training to a lack of sleep. If there's no parasympathetic nervous system activation, and it's always sympathetic, you never get that recovery period. And that's so crucial.
Exactly, right. Just getting that system in order makes such a big difference, because you, like, just think about it from a pure nerve standpoint. You got to make sure you have enough energy to the nerve to make sure that it fires properly. You got to make sure that the right balance, so that you're not having excitatory and like parasympathetic points in balance, because otherwise you're going to have a way imbalanced component from that. If you have a way too long excitatory component, it messes with your sleep, it messes with your recovery, it messes with everything, and then everything just starts to degrade, and you start getting tensions, you start getting neurological components where your cortisol's off, your tension's up in your body, you're getting inflamed, things stop working as well, and then that's when you get into bigger issues down the road where your tissue's falling apart.
What are the biggest issues you're currently running into with your like regular clientele?
I think because I'm a little bit unique, I tend to see a little bit more of there's two realms that make it interesting for me. Is the one is the digestive component, because usually people might be seeing issues and they don't get the outcomes that they're looking for with just normal like tissue release. So like a typical one I hear all the time is, oh, I keep getting this T1, T2 that needs to keep getting readjusted all the time. And if you adjust it over and over and over and over and over again, and it keeps going out, there's a bigger issue going on than just that. And so usually if you make an adjustment, I mean, sure, we have our little postural things going on and everything that are problematic. And if you're pushing yourself, sure, you're going to get yourself busted up. But you shouldn't have the same problem popping up over and over again without issues. So gut is the one big thing that tends to be a really major one for a lot of people. Just tension and constipation and rigidity in the torso from that causes a lot of problems. And then the other one is cranial stuff. And so that's from head injuries, from knocks to the head, from car accidents, from things like that. And it's basically you have your cranium, and this one's a bit more of the unique realm of osteopaths. And it's basically trying to help rebalance the tension and the pressure in the cranium. And that can happen from football, car accident, whatever it is, you hit your head and the brain shifts, rattles around in the cage, and that's when you can get some swelling and irritation going on one side. And it might be maybe not presenting so many symptoms like headaches or anything like that in the moment, but it can create a pattern and a pull going on. And that's where we get some unusual symptoms globally throughout the body, right? And it's amazing how many times you can have a symptom from completely different region of the body from something else. But that's one of the ones that kind of really pops up, is having some people from either sporting events or car incidents and having the rattle the cage aspect, where tension's going on and pulling through the lateral side or from the post, depending on where the head was hit, and it causing neurological, because your nerves are all hubbed in here. So when you get a tension in here, it starts to alter either nerve tension, membranous tension, or the tension in the dura mater, which goes down your spinal column, and it can mess up your tailbone from your head injury. So those are the weird ones that necessarily you don't think about, because, elbow joint connected to the right, like you don't think about it from that local standpoint. It sometimes is a much bigger event.
Yeah, that's crazy, because I know when my digestion's off, I think it's like my fourth or fifth rib on my left side always goes out.
Yeah, exactly.
Without fail. Like it's one of these ribs, but it always goes out and it always hurts.
There was an osteopathic study done a while back for my college, and it was the liver congestion. So if your liver is too inflamed. Basically just too stored with like your diaphragm's not pumping and your liver's too filled and it's causing tension. So that liver, whenever it's in dysfunction like that, it can reduce your range of motion, your lumbar spine by about 30 to 40%. So
that's crazy.
So you got tight lower back. Is it because you're sitting in a bad posture from that standpoint, or is it because you're not breathing, your diaphragm's not moving, you're pumping your liver, and it's causing all that tension up your lumbar system? So you've got the normal everyday, I overdid it and beat myself up in the lower back, or I beat up my lower back because I was vulnerable because my liver was out, and then that caused the cascade. So is it always A, always B? It just depends on the individual, but that's the weird stuff that can kick in.
Yeah, that's crazy when you think about that. Like, there's so many things. Like, so since all this happened, I changed my training style because when I said, okay, if I can't worry about my numbers, like I said, it's going to be a building year. I'm just going to work on some imbalances, a lot more range of motion, more volume, more recovery, and just different movement patterns. So I've been doing a lot more martial arts specific training because I'm getting back into jiu-jitsu when this is all said and done and we can go back to studios. And since then, I've started, since it's probably been a month and a half, I've been doing a lot more like different movement patterns, a lot more kettlebell work because it's a lot more freedom of movement and better ranges. But everything is improved. Like my joints feel better, like my hips feel better, my digestion's improved. And it's really different. It's really funny because when I'm squat benching dead as my primary movers all the time, I feel good in a squat benching dead, but everything else feels like
crap.
Right. Like,
and that's a great thing with diversity part, right? Like you're talking about it right there, right? Because if you're always benching, whenever you're trying to get better at a movement, you're becoming more specialized, right? So you're trying to, like, I want to be good at bench. Well, you got to have a certain amount of tension and you only want to be efficient in that, right? But it's not necessarily good for life, right? And so that it's weird that like you're so tight in here because of all your bench, and then if you don't have any mobility going back, that's the exposure, right? So that's the other part of it that's really important to think. And so what I like to do with people is have them go not necessarily just in like a specific exercise or a specific routine to be able to do corrective or specifically that way, but what you're trying to do is open up the joint as much as you can, get that kind of gapping, get that kind of mobility. And don't push through pain. You don't want to like destroy anything, but it's just, you got to build up, right? So you just try to improve the movement as best you can, try to get to an area that you weren't able to eventually, not right away, but in that way, you just slowly build up the capacity, slowly build up the ability of it. And then that way you don't leave yourself as vulnerable.
Yeah, and that's it's so funny because like I'm actually getting a lot more into kettlebell work, and I shot a couple of videos, and all of a sudden I got people coming and like, "Oh, you're a kettlebell guy now, whatever," in powerlifting, and I'm like, it's not. I'm a kettlebell guy. It's just another tool. So I'm using it to build up for longevity's sake. Like I want to have that range of motion. Like the stabilizer muscle activation I get from doing like kettlebell work versus a barbell or a dumbbell is different. And that's one of the powerful things I got again when I went down to Matt. And I asked him, and everyone thinks I went down to like a lot of people ask like, oh, you went to like a super strong guy, like multiple all-time world records, stuff like that. And like, you know, you're trying to get stronger. And I was like, no, what I went to Matt Wenning for was like, how did you train for 30 years with no injuries? And that's what I was going on about. And that's what I would figure out. And that's when he taught me the conjugate method. I spent 3 or 4 months working with him in that stuff. And I think for longevity's sake, I think a modified version of the West Side version of a conjugate method of training for like longevity and powerlifting, as well as strength and athletic development versus a linear progression model. Now, don't get me wrong, linear progression is super important. You will get really good at squat, bench, and dead, but I find the more of the exact same movement I do, I find like I leave a little bit of something else behind. Like if I only do a straight bar bench and I'm just really good at one groove of a straight bar bench with my hands in this exact position, I'm probably losing a bit of here. I'm probably losing a bit here. I might be losing a bit overhead. I'm losing other movements someplace else. So I find having that diversity of, say, a conjugate method style where it's a heavy day and then a light day and a heavy day and a light day and then like a conditioning kind of block, it makes a huge difference for when you really want to say, okay, I'm going to spend the next 3 months on a straight bar with straight weight and that's it. As opposed to I spent 5 years on a straight weight. And that's it.
Oh, totally. And just think about it from like powerlifting background, right? Like how many powerlifters have you like met that have, like me included, right? Where I had close to a 300 bench, but it was challenging to put over 170 to 80 pounds over my head. It's
again,
like,
that's fine.
that's,
Like
it's not that it's a problem. It's just that your strength discrepancy is there, and that can lead to, yeah, exactly. So it's not that you can't be good at what you're doing. It's just don't be absolutely awful back here.
Yeah,
right.
And that's the thing we have to kind of flex in and out. I think it's definitely interesting how the more you study the human body for strength development, for everything like functional neurology, osteopathy, I think the more I realize like how yin and yang and how much you have to flex in either direction depending on certain times of the season, certain times of the year, certain times in your life, depending on like more yang over here, and then you have to go into a little bit of yin to kind of bring it back and kind of find that balance.
Oh, totally, right? It's that exactly perfect yin yang, right? Because you want to be good at what you want to be good at, but you don't want to just only do too much of that to leave yourself vulnerable in another pathway, right? And that's where, because usually I had a good buddy of mine who was a powerlifter, and he 600-700 pounds and squatting dead. So really strong dude at 21, 22. But he tore his pec doing light band stretching, right? And so 350-pound bench, torn pec doing light stretching. It's like, so you would think that there shouldn't be that kind of vulnerability there, right? And that's, you don't ever get yourself destroyed. And usually the stuff that you're like really strong at, it's usually the stuff that you neglect all the time. And that's where you think about with coming back to the other stuff, right? Is like, if you don't sleep, if you don't diet or do the diet properly, that's going to be the spot that destroys you, not the stuff that you're good at.
It's crazy, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah, it's try to get that balance.
Yeah. Dude, that's probably a pretty good one for today. You got anything else you want to throw in there?
Just no, it was good talking with you and everything. And the biggest piece of it is just try to get symmetry and test yourself that way. So try to keep yourself moving in multiple directions, kind of keep yourself moving in a good overall pattern, and sleep. And that's the biggest advice I can give to anybody. And so that will help with a lot of different things.
Yeah, we could literally do this all day. I'm having so much fun. It's stupid.
That was great, man.
Well, let me end it, but stick around for a second. So,
okay, sounds good.
Guys, that's it. I hope you enjoyed our little talk with Jason, and we'll probably have him back on again because, well, we could literally do this all day. We're nerds. So, other than that, keep getting your strong on, guys. Have a good one.